Hello, I'm Matt Donnelly, and this is your Dallas Cowboys versus the New York Giants Monday Night Football game preview. Hey, the New York Giants, they are 1-point favorites heading into this one, and there are 6 undefeated teams heading into week number 3. We have the Miami Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills. These two play off against each other this week. We got the Kansas City Chiefs, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the New York Football Giants. The New York Giants? Yeah, you heard that correctly. Both the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Giants are coming off of 3-point wins last week. There is the Giants. They beat Carolina in 1916. And the Dallas Cowboys enter Monday's divisional matchup after knocking off the Cincinnati Bengals last week, 20-17. Talk about the quarterback position. Let's get into the tail of the tape here. We have Cooper Rush for the Dallas Cowboys here. Is Cooper Rush really an upgrade for this Cowboys offense? Calm down. I'm just kind of kidding here. But Cooper Rush, hey, he did lead them boys to a win over the Bengals in week number 2. Then again, Mitch Trubisky beat the Bengals in week number 1. So, hey, make of that what you will. Now, let's give Cooper Kupp some credit here. He did toss a touchdown along with a 95.5 passer rating on his way to a 235-yard performance with really just a week of snaps under his belt. Mayfield and the Panthers, they were limited to 145 passing yards and a 74.6 passer rating last week against this Giants defense. New York, hey, they hope to have Kevin Thibodeau there and Azeez Ojulari there back, so that will help their pass rush if these guys are able to return. Now, totally off topic here, but Rush is an underrated Canadian band here. Geddy Lee, Neil Peart for the dub. Now, expect today's Cooper Rush to play a mean pride. You know what? I'll show myself out right now. Now, the other quarterback in this matchup is Daniel Jones. Probably too early to call Jones a game manager, but Jones had 176 passing yards last week, and he's averaging just 5.2 yards per attempt, as he has failed to throw for more than 200 yards for the second consecutive week. Now, Cooper Rush, he's been able to spread the ball out fairly evenly among his pass catchers there. CeeDee Lamb 13, Tony Pollard 8, Brown 7, Schultz 6, Elliott 3. Daniel Jones really doesn't have anyone to spread the ball to outside of Sterling Shepard, Richie James, and David Sills. More on that a little bit later. Now, I don't care how good of a quarterback you may be. Micah Parsons can change things just like that. Now, Parsons, he has 4 sacks in 2 games, and he is bringing his friends with him. As Dorrance Armstrong there, he has a pair of sacks. Dante Fowler, he's gotten in the action, and we haven't even mentioned DeMarcus Lawrence yet this season. Dallas, they got to Joe Burrow 6 times as a unit a week ago. And that's not exactly what Daniel Jones wants to hear right now after he's been sacked 8 times in the first 2 weeks. How do you fix not getting sacked? You run the ball. Both these teams have running backs, but only one of them is actually running the ball efficiently. Now, the Dallas Cowboys, they have Ezekiel Elliott with an average of 49 yards per game the first 2 weeks. Dallas has to do something to get Zeke eating it once again. He is forcing a missed tackle every 25 attempts, which explains why the yards are simply not there. He has not been able to create for himself this season. Then again, it's been more about volume the last couple seasons as far as Ezekiel Elliott is concerned. Look, Elliott, he's basically a declining asset in the run game for a while. 2016, he averaged 108.7 yards per game. 2017, that dipped to 98.3. 2018, 95.6. 2019, 84.8. 2020, 65.3. 2021, 58.9. 2022, here we are. He's about 52 yards per game. Them are just the facts. Good thing his cap hit isn't like 18 million or something crazy like that. Oh, shoot. Sorry. Yeah, it is. Now, on paper, you can run on this Giants defense. Then again, if you take Christian McCaffrey's 49-yard run off the table last week, New York did a pretty good job at containing him, holding him to 53 yards on 14 attempts. Now, Tony Pollard, he's the more explosive back in this Cowboys backfield. Last week against Cincinnati, Pollard carried the ball 9 times for 43 yards and a touchdown, which basically works out, if I do the math quickly, to about 4.8 yards per carry, which is considerably higher than Elliott's 3.5. Pollard also added 55 yards in the passing game on 4 receptions. Now, a deeper look at this Cowboys backfield and how these splits are. Now, Elliott's rush share, 62.5% in weeks number 1 and 2. Hey, that's pretty even. Meanwhile, his target share is 4.9 and 6.7. And as far as Tony Pollard is concerned, get this, 37.5, 37.5. At least they're consistent in how they don't allow Tony Pollard to run from week to week, while his target share went from 4.9% to 23.3%, which was a top target share amongst running backs in week number 2. Now, you want to talk about a running back who can run the ball and catch the ball out of the backfield? How about Saquon Barkley? Now, New York is going to ride Saquon Barkley as far as he will take them in 2022. It may be the only way to keep pressure off Daniel Jones. Now, Barkley, he leads the NFL in rushing yards with 236, averaging 6.1 yards per carry. He's also contributed in that passing game, like I said earlier, 9 catches for 46 yards. Look, for much the same, heavy run usage and screens this week. Expect that. I could talk about all the other backs here in New York, but there aren't any of note. Heck, they don't even get on the field if Saquon Barkley is there. He commands 83% of the snaps, which is the second most, and 85% of the carries, which is the fifth most. We talked briefly on Barkley in the passing game. He has been on the field 63% of the Giants' passing plays this season, which is more than Kenny Golladay and more than Kadarius Toney can speak of. Now, Dallas, they did an excellent job against Joe Mixon last week. They dominated in the trenches and limited Mixon to 57 yards on the ground, with averaging about 3 yards per carry. So if the running game is not clicking, how about the wide receivers? Well, starting with Dallas Cowboys here and CeeDee Lamb. Lamb now has back-to-back 11 target weeks there. The difference being he and Rush connected 7 times there last week for 75 yards, while he only had 2 receptions back in week number 1. Maybe Lamb is becoming more of a fantasy relevant receiver, but in his last 18 games, he's only been a top 20 receiver in 6 of those contests. It is going to be interesting to see how Lamb's yards per reception goes from here on out. It dipped from 14.5 to 10.7, and yet he was more productive in week number 2 with that lower yards per reception number. Now, maybe that's because Dak Prescott wants to push the ball a little bit more. Maybe Cooper Rush takes what the defenses are giving him. We'll see, but something to monitor, and we got to pay attention to. Now, the other thing we need to pay attention to is what Michael Gallup's status is going to be, because if he gets into this attack here for the Dallas Cowboys, good things are going to happen. Now, Noah Brown for the second straight week. If you had Noah Brown as a Cowboys top receiver, you were absolutely correct. Brown leads Dallas with 159 yards in 2 games, including 91 last week against Cincinnati on 5 receptions. Now, CeeDee Lamb, he's likely going to draw Darnay Holmes this week. Expect Dallas to take advantage of here. That said, Holmes, he allowed just 4 yards last week while being targeted 5 times, and he also forced a fumble. If that matchup goes down, then expect Adoree Jackson there will be lining up across from Noah Brown. Michael Gallup, there is a chance he could return this week, and that actually helps CeeDee Lamb, as the Cowboys have been missing that player who can stretch the field. Now, for the New York Giants, Sterling Shepard. Prior to injury striking last season, you could see that Shepard and Jones had a rapport. In 2 games, Jones has targeted Shepard 14 times, with Shepard catching 8 of those for 105 yards, including 6 for 34 last week. Looking over some more numbers there from PFF last week, Shepard saw a 91% route participation with a 32% target share. That 10 targets there against Carolina, while being responsible for 44% of the Giants' air yards. Now, honestly, that's not really something to be proud of, but it sounds really impressive. David Sills, Richie James. I mean, James is the early leader in the Giants clubhouse in terms of receptions and receiving yards. He's got 10 receptions for 110 yards. That's right. We're talking about David Sills instead of Kenny Golladay, who's unhappy with his role with the team. Now, guess what, Kenny? No one's happy about you. No one's happy about the role you've played on this team or the production that you've had. And Kadarius Toney, who happens to be redecorating the doghouse yet again, seeing David Sills there catch 90% of the target participation there to Toney's only 37. I mean, Brian Dable, he does not let the dogs out. Let's put it that way. Who does Trevon Diggs cover? Now, conventional wisdom would say Sterling Shepard, but James has looked the better of the two so far, including a 5 catch on 6 target performance there for 51 yards against Carolina last week. As much acclamation as Trevon Diggs gets, next-gen stats show that he allowed 7 receptions for 75 yards on 9 targets a week ago. So teams, hey, they clearly have no problem targeting him. While Anthony Brown, he also struggled last week, allowing a touchdown and 69 yards on 7 receptions. And finally, the tight ends, there's nothing really to talk about here. I mean, really, there's not. I mean, if Dalton Schultz can't go, and that's something to keep monitoring here. Again, for fantasy purposes, I'm pivoting away from Schultz here this week. I'm not starting Jake Ferguson. Jake Ferguson is not a fantasy option right now. And for the New York Giants, hey, Daniel Bellinger, he caught his first NFL pass last week. It was for a touchdown. It literally was his only touchdown so far this season. And I don't expect any fantasy relevancy coming out of that either. But where I do expect fantasy relevancy to come from is fantasypoints.com. And hey, if I want to save a little bit of money while I'm getting that fantasy discount there, I'm using 22 Vipers 10 and getting 10% off that subscription. Do yourself a favor, head to fantasypoints.com, tell them Matt sent you, use that promo code, save yourself some money, and get yourself an advantage on the rest of your league meets. And we'll see you next week.